Hello everyone, I am Ryan, and today we're pivoting a little bit from my usual RPG focused content, and we're going to talk about Halo Infinite. Now it seems only right and only fair that I talk about this game's re-reveal, considering I launched my channel talking about Halo Infinite. Now, if you haven't been with me for that long, you can see here in the video my paleness and the lack of confidence in my eyes and face, that I was but a wee lad putting myself into the ring of YouTube for the first time. I really wasn't going for a Halo reference there or a pun, but I guess I did. And that's why you should subscribe to the channel for my corny ass jokes. And also I talk about games sometimes, most of the time I would say, 50-50. There will be timestamps in the video for those of you who hate introductions or talking or any kind of human interaction. So the sections will be broken down with some campaign discussion, multiplayer, and then the release date or lack of release date. Halo was revealed during an Xbox stream in 2020, the results of which were pretty mixed, right? Some of us walked away saying, great stuff, loved it. The rest, well, not everyone loved it. Mixed. I would even say it's negative, to be honest. I also enjoyed it myself personally, but I also don't know if I have an eye for the finer details that some people do when it comes to Halo. I was probably even more interested than I was last time for Halo Infinite when it was shown off at E3. I acknowledge it was better overall, even if I didn't dislike the showing from last time, and I think that's inarguable that it was a better showing this time. Some of the story stuff shown was right at home with Halo. I thought immediately with some of the dialogue we did hear from Master Chief, like, damn, my dude has the best one-liners in the biz. Am I allowed to say biz? I'm saying it, biz.
You have one bullet against an entire army. What can you do on your own?
I told you. It's enough. Something stopped your deletion. We need to find out why.
But this wasn't the mission.
The missions change. They always do.
And then there's that famous line from Halo 2, of course.
Just one question. What if you miss?
I won't.
Steve Downes' delivery, I think, is probably what nails it most of the time, because on paper, you'd probably read these lines and maybe say, yeah, that's fine, it'll be fine, but not really see what the big deal was about it until you watch it and you hear it and you're like, damn, this guy is cool. Cooler than I'll ever be, and I'm a pretty cool cat already, which I know just by saying that you've probably subscribed or unsubscribed to then subscribe again because you know I'm so fucking funny. The other thing too is I really do think that they're using a little bit more of a subtle way of showing Chief's humanity, and as many other people have probably noticed, the way that Chief gently handles the dead Marines, showing them a kind of respect. Some people take issue with Chief talking too much in some of the more recent Halo games, mainly the ones from 343, and then giving too much insight into what he's thinking, but it does harken back, at least what we saw here, to the days of old, where at least based on the small tease of the campaign, Chief is just more stoic and subdued. Chief was always, I think, intended to be some kind of avatar for the player to put themselves onto, project themselves onto, so this gives me the impression that they're being a little more restrained in that regard. And my streak of not being able to speak in a video has continued. Yes. Now, to be fair, this could just be the place in the campaign that they're showing, but if it does have like this same atmosphere throughout where it's kind of darker and it shows more than it tells, it could be exciting. Personally, the only Halo campaign I absolutely just didn't like flat out, I didn't like Halo 5. I just think the premise was never fully realized, and if you even look at the marketing for that game and got like tricked by it, I guess, it was very underwhelming when you actually played the game. You had this whole idea that Master Chief and Spartan Locke were going to have this major face-off, and then when they did, it was for like one scene, and the next one, they were together again, and now there's this weird undying hatred for Spartan Locke amongst the community, which I think is a more of a fault with the writing than the actual character, but that's probably just a hill I'm destined to die on. And look, I did show this last time, but I'm going to show it again. If you don't know what I'm talking about when I talk about the marketing for that game being amazing and the game being underwhelming, take a look at this trailer and you'll see what I mean.
All hail the conquering hero. Let us remember him as our protector, and not the one who gave us this. As our savior, and not our betrayer. Let us see him forever as you, and not as you. All hail the conquering the one who was supposed to save us all. But now I must save us from you.
I will say, despite the fact that I enjoyed what they showed last time, this was definitely a better showing overall. I do believe that's probably almost inarguable. If I do have one criticism, it's that it didn't really give us much of an idea of how structurally the campaign is set to work, because if you recall, the game is supposed to be a more open title, likely a bit closer to the other Halo games, most notably like Combat Evolved. I mean, you saw a bit of that last year and then in the beginning here of this preview, but I got the impression with this that they were going to try and keep the showing more succinct enough and probably hide it in the middle of the show. So if people didn't like it, it would have been forgotten about. And if they did like it, then hey, you know, it would have been memorable enough to talk about after. But I could be wrong about that. I'm just speculating based on its placement being like weirdly in the middle and only for a few minutes. I do have a lot of memories of multiplayer from Halo, especially Halo 3 and Halo Reach, like many people. So some of the multiplayer was shown in action and I thought it was great. Best way to describe the multiplayer, at least for me with Halo, is frenetic, kinetic, and chaotic. If you have all of those working in tandem with one another, you have a great recipe for success with gameplay, but the multiplayer overall as well. I imagine that there were some concerns that having the grappling hook would make multiplayer unbalanced in a way, but based on the extended deep dive with 343 and the trailer itself, it doesn't really give me that impression. It's more like it's giving the player new avenues of attack and gameplay opportunities. Ultimately, I do think that depends on how the maps are built. It didn't seem to be too bad here, but it's hard to know without having played it. I do look at it kind of like having wall bouncing in Gears. If you can master it or at least manage it and do a pretty good job at it, you're going to be infinitely better than another player. No pun intended there. See, because I said infinite. But that's really all my thoughts on the grappling hook. It really looked like it was just something of a tool that needed to be used properly throughout the sandbox and the maps that lends itself to more creativity without creating an overpowered, unbalanced scenario. The best thing about the whole idea of multiplayer is that it's going to be free to play. And I have some friends who have never played Halo before. I know, shocker, right? People who haven't played Halo, tough finding those. Some of them haven't. So for some people who want to try this Halo, it's on Game Pass, it's the Master Chief Collection, and then you have Halo Wars, and of course you have Infinite that's going to be on Game Pass and also have free-to-play multiplayer. So there's really no excuse, unless you're not interested at all, of course, but there's really no excuse to say, oh, I haven't played one. You have so many different ways to access it now, or you're going to have even more. You'll be able to find out whether the games are for you or this game is for you, and if you like it. Maybe you buy the full game so you own it, or you buy a few cosmetic packs which you will be able to purchase. But even then, it does seem pretty fair, at least on the monetization front. There's no element of chance or loot boxes. It's just plain old buying something you think looks cool, and it's all cosmetic. And look, and those things will likely evolve as they get more feedback. They described it in the deep dive video as the game having multiple seasons, multiplayer seasons, which is becoming common with multiplayer games these days. Instead of just multiplayer and updating it occasionally with performance updates and issues, it's treated more like a evolving service that gives players different things to unlock and go for throughout the months. It's kind of, I think, how developers are trying to create and capture constant engagement over longer periods of time with their games. And look, I'm not really into that, but I'm not also really a multiplayer person overall. So I think it looks like a lot of fun and chaotic as well. Again, I am really not a big multiplayer person. I do dabble in some games, and if I have friends who want to play, of course, and Halo is one of them that I'm genuinely excited to play the multiplayer, despite not being in love with service elements, but that is generally just part of the industry these days, and I got to deal with that. I also want to point out that I do think that the multiplayer looked very good and it looked very Halo, definitively so. I didn't play Halo 5's multiplayer too much, but I remember it just not being very memorable to me. The maps were kind of weirdly symmetrical, if I remember correctly, among other things, and that it just wasn't for me. There does seem to be more planned going into the summer when it comes to Halo, and as far as a technical preview you can possibly qualify for if you sign up for the Insider program, which, if you want to have that chance, I think you should do so. Despite all of that, there was no release date, no official one. We got a pretty vague acknowledgement of a holiday 2021 release, and that was it. I am of two minds on this, that if you recall, 343 completely botched the launch of the Master Chief Collection. It was buggy, had server and connection issues, it just wasn't up to the polish that it needed to be at launch. Yeah, and look, I acknowledge they have turned that game around, I hear you. and I even enjoy it myself to this day. But the point is, with that, and in my opinion, the lackluster release of Halo 5, I say give these guys as much time as they need to get this game ready. So if it's not ready by holiday 2021, push it into 2022. I think it's fine. Now, yes, I know Phil Spencer was just on the Drop Frames podcast. I'll put a link below, and he was asked about that lack of release date, and he just chalked it up to just wanting to nail down the specific day because of other releases and not being overshadowed by other titles, which is a fair point. So there is that to consider. He reiterated though that they're very confident in releasing this year. It's just about nailing down the logistics of the release date. Like, they know the window of time that they're going with, but they just don't know the exact date yet. So obviously two pretty big things to consider when it comes to Halo Infinite. Clearly they made big strides over the past year with the game, and if they do have to delay it again, it will suck. But I'm willing to hold out if it gets us a better game. Obviously, if the game is not up to snuff, the argument would then probably become, well, it's on Game Pass and most people didn't pay for it outright, which I understand that argument, but I don't think that means we should just accept anything that goes on the platform because, well, you didn't pay full price for it, so what do you care? Obviously, I'm just speculating there. I don't know if that's actually going to be an argument that happens if the game comes out and it's not performing. Now, obviously, if they don't nail this, I don't think Microsoft or Xbox is just done, and that would be an outrageous claim to make, and I would honestly suspect anybody who is making that claim to be knowing something we don't know, and they should probably tell us so we can maybe warn them, because it sounds like foul play. But it doesn't really speak well if it doesn't do well of Xbox or 343 that they just have not been able to get a good grip on this franchise. If you look at like Nintendo with Mario, love or hate Nintendo, love or hate any of the last few Mario 3D platformers, I think we can all agree, at least on a baseline, that all of them are at minimum good, because I think Nintendo knows it's an important franchise and intellectual property for them to nail every single time. And look, I really don't know if Halo has the same kind of luster or the same kind of brand recognition that Mario has, or as it used to at least. The point being, I think we all would want to feel like Halo is still important to Xbox's brand, even if it's not the system seller that it used to be. So I think they really should take their time and really just take it with care. I saw an article the other day that 343 is investigating upping the player counts in MCC to 40 or 60 players at a time now, which is a little strange to me. 343 Industries producer Sean Soderski saying, Halo's epic. If we can add more people, which again, you can, but obviously performance in some of the other consoles, if we can add that kind of stuff to go higher than 16 players in these classic games, well, get it up to 40, 60, you know what I mean. That'd be wild. Look, maybe I'm being ignorant, but that's often why I ask you guys to comment below and correct me if you think I'm wrong or if you have a different opinion. I'm sure it's doable. That's not my concern, and that I know that there's a different team likely working on the multiplayer for Master Chief Collection and Halo Infinite. It just strikes me as like an odd thing to be focusing on. Maybe the Master Chief Collection is from 2014 and it's great, and don't get me wrong, it's playable and it's fun. It just seems like maybe something you would want to put into your new game that is going to be made with the current gen consoles in mind. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. It just struck me as a bit odd, though I guess I could explain it as they're talking about like the older games like Combat Evolved or Halo 2 or 3 being on older engines, so being able to perform better under more stress, I guess. I don't know. But basically, that's my impressions of Halo Infinite. Its campaign, its multiplayer, and its non-release date. I am excited to hear from you. What do you think of Halo Infinite? The campaign? The multiplayer? Let me know below. In the meantime, thumbs up if you liked the video, thumbs down if you didn't, and subscribe if you have that inclination to do so. And even if you don't, do it anyway. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all soon, and I love you all. Maybe.
Oh, yeah.